Hey guys, welcome back to SED 445. We're on week 4 now, and we're going to discuss communication today. Yay! Why does communication matter? Why do we have to explore communication with families? And what part does it play in behavior management? So in the realm of behavior and working in behavior intervention or even just teaching, it can be very stressful when it comes to behaviors and communicating with students, with their families, having to call them and let them know what their child may have done, communicating with staff members and colleagues, and then, having to talk with administrators about behavior of students can be very, very stressful, and it can be emotionally charged at times. So we're talking today about, communication allows us to understand the expectations in the classroom community, but also how to avoid any misunderstandings with people when we're communicating with them, right? So be prepared for the overzealous family member at open house. And when I say parent, I also mean guardian or family member. Be prepared for the parent who wants to tell you how to teach, the parent who wants to talk every single day and have, a daily email of what their child's doing. So really setting healthy boundaries there. The parent who wants to bring their children in late, so it's not really the student's fault in this situation. How are you going to have that tough conversation with them? The parent who thinks you assign too much homework, or the parent who is upset about their child's grades, just to name a few. So some tips for communicating with families. First and foremost, be respectful. We're going to avoid patronizing or intimidating or alienating parents or families. Consider the family culture, and that families are the experts and number one source of information on those students, on their children. So we also need to understand that parents may have had negative experiences with school, so we need to also just be sensitive to that and consider cultural differences between home and school. So down below it says respect parent or guardian wishes to the extent it's possible. So I have certainly heard that, well, why don't you just drag them out of class if he's misbehaving? Well, we can't do that. So I will respect their wishes to the extent that's possible. So I am not able to drag your student out, and just being respectful of their point of view, but also that, I can't do that here at school. Sorry. All right, iMessages. If you work in an elementary school, you will hear about iMessages because we teach them to our students, right? But we also need to consider using them ourselves with parents, students, colleagues. So iMessages are a clear, assertive, non-threatening way to tell someone your point of view. iMessages focus on the present conflict. They typically use a feeling word. It helps to describe what you need. You're speaking about yourself, and you're describing how you feel when something happens. This is less confrontational and focuses more on the situation at hand versus anything that may have happened yesterday or the day before, right? So when we're going through these discussion boards, with your peers, consider some of these iMessages, right? So when we're interacting with our colleagues, it's really important to not blame or criticize, certainly not name call or bring up past grievances. This may not be a time to offer solutions. You may want to have some ideas to throw around later on when that person is more comfortable to brainstorm, but you may not want to offer such solutions in that moment. Don't assume that the other person knows how you feel. Don't accuse or attack. All right, so a lot of don'ts there, although I like to frame things in a more positive way, but those are some don'ts, right? Active listening is listening without interrupting. So sometimes that can be really hard for me. I'm going to admit, when I'm emotionally charged, I won't shut up. So that might be a time that I might need to take a little breather before I want to talk to somebody, because sometimes when you get really worked up, your mouth and your brain just kind of don't, they're not simpatico. So active listening, let's get back to that, going on a tangent here, helps to discover the other person's perspective. So it's impartial. You're not taking sides. You're not telling your own story or problems or asking clarification. You are, asking clarification and clarifying questions. You're not giving advice or suggesting solutions in that moment. You're listening. You may also want to restate, paraphrase, or summarize what the other person is saying. So this is really important to not ask those clarifying questions in a way that demeans the other person or communicates to them, well, you're not doing a really good job telling me what you want to say, so you want to make sure that you're doing that respectfully. And I'm going to get to some lead-ins in just a moment. Show understanding non-verbally. So watch your nonverbals. So get to that in a minute as well. Be empathic or empathetic, which are two kind of different things. But think about how the other person's feeling and think in the other person's place to understand. Watch your body language and your eye contact facing the speaker, but like we talked about in our last lecture video, learn and consider cultural differences, because eye contact may be something that is not respectful in that culture. So just be aware of that. Let's see. Active listening lead-ins help you focus on the other person's message rather than your reaction to their message. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that it sounds like let me see if I'm hearing what you're saying. So you could Google some strategies for more active listening tips, but it will help you kind of understand the other person a little bit more. And a little tip for, if you're practicing active listening, write down some questions or thoughts you may have so you're not interrupting the other person. What is your body saying? 80% of communication is nonverbal, so consider your paraverbals. So your facial expression. You are not seeing my face right now because when I go back and watch these videos, I'm like, it's not good. So my facial expression when, in a highly charged situation, I have to be really, really mindful about, the eyebrows go up and you can tell I'm not impressed. So I've had to be aware of that and work on that, especially while working with students with, any kind of behavior issues, right? Eye contact, like we talked about earlier, just make sure it's culturally appropriate. Tone of voice, so tone, volume, and cadence of your voice. Be very aware of those. Posture, gestures, the distance. A comfortable distance for talking people on average is 1.5 to 3 feet, but also again, consider the cultural variables. So some cultures prefer more space, some prefer less, but also, hold true to what makes you comfortable as well, as far as, if you don't want somebody in your face, you can certainly take a step back. Gestures, distance, touch. I don't recommend touching, but, if a parent is breaking down at an IEP meeting and they're sitting next to you, you can slide those tissues over and maybe give them a, pat on the back or whatever. Sometimes that may be appropriate, but really just be careful about that. A general rule, don't touch students, but consider sensory issues of the student. It may be part of their plan to have some, OT or deep pressure. In the event of conflict, it's really important to speak softer. So sometimes people will have to lower their voice to be able to hear you because you're speaking softer. Speak slower. The brain slows down significantly when you are highly emotionally charged or anxious. So sometimes speaking a little slower, so watching your cadence, looking the person in the eye if it's appropriate, check your body language, those paraverbals I talked about earlier. Remind yourself and the other person that you can come to a fair resolution. So understand that we can work through this. Let's work together. Take a break if necessary to collect your thoughts. This is a really big one because we may often make decisions or say things when we're not regulated yet. So it's important for yourself and the other person to be in control before you're speaking, using those active listening strategies that I talked about earlier. And don't forget to breathe. 5 keys to successful parent-teacher communication. Begin the year by explaining how or when you will keep in touch. So you may want to, devote a little bit of time each week or every other week or each month to shoot that parent an update about what's going on. But just making sure that you're setting that expectation. You can expect to hear from me this often. Here's my contact information. Feel free to email me, call, whatever you're comfortable with right there. Never feel pressured to make an important decision during a parent conference or a conversation. This is really, really important because I feel like a lot of people overextend themselves. They think that they're helping when in reality, if they took a step back and thought about, a decision before they make it, you're able to kind of commit a little bit more to that decision. So it's okay to say, you know what, I'm going to have to think on that, or I'm going to have to look on, I'm going to have to look in on that, so don't feel like you have to make a decision immediately. Let parents know they can trust you, and you can do this by following through with what you say you're going to do. So don't feel pressured to make an important decision or to commit to something on the spot. Let's see. Assure parents you will notify them immediately about concerns you may have with their child. They just want to be reassured. And always be ready to explain what strategies you're already using to address a problem or concern that you're presenting to parents. So if there are significant behaviors going on in the classroom, you may want to document or jot down the strategies that you're using in your classroom or in your practice to inform the parents not only, but also to have that documentation of what you're doing and what might not be working. So when you're coming together in a team conversation, you can talk about those things. Reach out to parents early, frequently, and don't forget to be positive. So a lot of parents are, especially parents of children with chronic maladaptive behaviors, often get phone calls about the things that their child is doing wrong. And that sets them up. And they may already have a perception of, the school's not working on my team here. They are against me. They're against my kid, right? So it's really important to celebrate the positives. Maybe give a phone call home when something good happens. Another tip is to create a spreadsheet of your students and then try to once a month or once a week or however many students you may be handling, send a positive comment home, even if it's just a 2-minute, take 2 minutes to send an email home. That can go a long way, especially if they're from, a family or a culture that doesn't really embrace or value education that much. You want to make those positive connections as much as you can. So I hope that this was helpful for you to get a little bit of more foundation before we really get into more of the behavior management strategies and behavior management planning, just to think about how we're communicating with each other, with students, with parents and colleagues, and just to understand that communication is behavior, is the biggest communicator to people, right? So I'm creeping up on my 15-minute mark. I'm running out of steam clearly because I've done this like 5 times to make it right. Anyway, I'll see you on the boards, and thank you for watching. Take care.